morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this video. I'm Ms. Brown, your teacher, and this week we are learning about imperialism, which describes how bigger nations take over smaller nations. Make sure your name and period are on your paper, and to make sure that you answer the questions that are under thoughts and reflections. So if you're looking at your notes over here where it says thoughts and reflections, there are some critical thinking questions that you should make sure that you answer over there. Lego. All right, again, so we're discussing the age of imperialism, which is from the year 1800 until 1914. It encompasses the invasions of India, Africa, and China, and is a major component of World War I. All right, so you're probably wondering, what is imperialism? So imperialism is the policy in which a stronger nation extends their economic, political, or military control over a weaker or smaller nation. So, for example, when Great Britain came over to the Americas and took over major parts of America, at the time we were considered a smaller, weaker nation, and they were, along with France, Spain, and several other countries, able to come in and take over this country and carve it up. And you'll see the same thing happening in Africa. And mainly they do that to gain certain advantages, which we'll talk about in a second. All right, so at this point in history, the United States is not a major power and certainly not a major imperialist nation. We have just gained independence in 1776. Again, at this point in history, we're in 1800. And we're currently about to head into a civil war. In addition to Africa, China becomes a major target because of silk, gold, and then ivory and slaves in Africa. So both of these continents and countries are major targets, as well as India. Japan is not a target of imperialism, but actually targets other countries because they're hoping to become a major power. And so you got to kind of remember that if I'm not out conquering other nations, then that leaves me open to being conquered by other nations because I don't have the financial wherewithal to fight these other nations. While they're carving up other nations, they're getting resources, they're getting money, slaves in some cases, which helps them have more money, more power, more fighting power. And if I'm not a part of that, then I am going to be open for attack. So at the bottom of page 1, it has factors in fueling imperialism, and then it has 3 boxes. So in the first box, you should have nationalism. The second box, you should have industrial revolution. And in the last box, you're going to have this last one, a belief in a religious, racial, and cultural superiority of people of Anglo-Saxon or English descent. Usually when you hear the word Anglo-Saxon, you're usually talking about Caucasian or white people. All right, your first critical thinking question says, which of the following reasons would Henry Ford have had for imperialism? Now, if you don't remember who Henry Ford is the young man who creates the assembly line to make cars, and he essentially makes cars cheaper. He's also the creator or owner of, he's also the creator of the Ford car. So if you drive a Ford Thunderbird, a Ford F-150, whatever, all of those can be traced back to Henry Ford. So I'm asking you, as a person who's creating a car using the assembly line, which one of these reasons would be a reason he would have for imperialism? A, nationalism, B, industrial revolution, or C, superiority, that idea that I want to spread Christianity, culture, all of that. So you're just going to circle one of those answers on your paper. If there are no answer choices there, then write the answer: nationalism, industrial revolution, or superiority. All right, so we talked about there are 3 things that fuel imperialism. And the first one we talked about was nationalism. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Remember, nationalism is the idea that my nation is bigger and better than others, and we want to maintain that through. All right, 3 ways that the imperial nations gained land. Remember, nationalism means I believe my country to be the best. And one way to stay the best is by gaining land, which equals money and resources. 3 ways to do that were by making a treaty, 2 by purchasing land, and 3 by conquering land, which is not so peaceful. So the first 2 ways are peaceful ways to gain land. The last 3 not so peaceful, but gonna have to be used, because think about it. Would you allow somebody to come in your house and take over and take your resources? All right, again, we're still talking about ways that pushed imperialism. So you should be on page 2 under Industrial Revolution. All right, so the Industrial Revolution created this demand for raw materials. So again, if I need to make clothes, then I need cotton. I need denim. I need whatever. These raw materials that I'm going to make into something that you can use. If I smoke cigarettes, then I need tobacco. So where do I get that from? If I like clothing that is made of silk, I need the silk to make those silk shirts or what have you. If I have an oil mill or steel mill, where do I get the oil? Where do I get the steel? Et cetera, et cetera. So those raw materials couldn't always come from the country that owned that factory. So they could, number one, buy those materials, but that costs a lot of money. So again, the idea is I need to gain colonies that have these raw materials so I can get these things for free or nearly free. All right, so as we just talked about in terms of the Industrial Revolution, when you gain colonies, you gain these raw materials. Some of these raw materials include bananas, coffee, oranges, tea, melons, cocoa, exotic fruits, oil. All right, so your second critical thinking question, which should be at the top of page 2, says, what is a colony? If you don't know, Google it. Doesn't have to be a complete sentence. All right, our third reason that's pushing imperialism is the idea of religious, racial, or cultural supremacy. So again, what does that mean? We are better than you. Our religion is better than you. Our race, in terms of the white race, is better than you. Our culture is better than you, the way we do things. And we want to spread that culture because we believe it will help you, quote unquote. And so you have these missions that will go out to spread Christianity, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so again, we talked about this idea of civilizing you. We're going to civilize. Another word for that would be Europeanize, white eyes. I have to say it, I'm sorry, but that's essentially what you're doing. I'm going to come over, and because I believe the way you do things is uncivilized, barbaric, whatever, I'm going to come over and show you. And by show, I'm going to push you to do things the way I want you to do them. So you have quite a few people who are of African descent, meaning they hail from Africa, but they speak French or Dutch or something like that. That's a direct relation to this civilization. The idea that parts of Africa are Christian comes from that idea. All right, your third critical thinking question says, what is another word for civilized? If you don't know. All right, so there's a saying that came out around this time that said the sun never sets on the British Empire. And so what you're looking at here are various colonies that Britain owned throughout the world. So the red represents colonies that they actually dominated, that were owned by them. And the other colors represent some version of colonization that came, and funds and money that came back to Great Britain. So what does that saying mean? The sun never sets on the British Empire. Looking at this map, think about the sun, where it sets, where it is at different times of the day. What does that mean? The sun never sets on the British Empire. All right, so we have discussed the different things that fueled that fueled imperialism. Here's a justification for it. And again, I also said this kind of coincides with the superiority complex. This idea of survival of the fittest that came out in it's a theory of Charles Darwin, and they call it social Darwinism. The idea that the strong survive and the weak fall, and that they will dominate the weak. All right, critical thinking question number 4. What does this expression mean? The sun never sets on the British Empire. The sun never sets on the British Empire. Doesn't have to be in a complete sentence.